Well, in the summer of 1963, a young man came over from Channel 8, and they were wondering about starting a home gardening, having a home gardening program. And he'd talked to Dean Thompson, Dean Lee P. Thompson, who was Dean of Engineering and Applied Sciences. And he suggested 2 or 3 people he might talk with. I was one of them. And so we discussed this at some length, and well, what did you want? And finally we agreed we would try a series on home gardening. And we only agreed on 13 programs. And so this was the summer of '63, and we were going to do this sometime the next winter. So I had time to think about this and plan 13 sections of horticulture and what you would do on each. And so we did the 13 programs, and they got through, and at the end of the season they said, well, you know, that went pretty well. Why don't we do some more next year? I said, well, how many? They said, well, why don't we try 20? Well, we started then in the fall taping, and it went on day and night from then on, summer and winter. Well, they would run it twice a week. Channel 10 started running it, and they would run it at 6 o'clock Sunday morning or something like that. And I would wonder who would watch it, and yet you would get letters from people out in the state who had been watching it. So it was viewed. I think the directors were always a little disappointed in the program in that every time they had a survey of their locally produced programs, Gardening for Fun always came out on top. And of course the directors, this isn't an insult to you, but I mean, they all wanted to do some finer things in life, musicals or some fancy art thing, and no matter what they did, just old bound gardening, dirty gardening, would be the most popular program they produced. And not because of me, but just the subject, I think. We taped the first in February of '64, and then in the late '70s, they said, we're building a mobile unit that we can go out and do things on location. And we'd like to make a series of programs, and you could use it as a class. You repeat them several times. And so we stopped doing the regular program we'd been doing then, and we spent about a year planning what I never planned much, but you got to plan. What are you going to do? Where are you going to do it? What do you need to do it? And first you had to find a place to do it. And so we devised 13 programs for each of the 2 different classes, having the same subjects with different material in them for spring and fall semesters. And we set up a garden area out on our farm there. At that time, the farm was a half section of land. That's 320 acres, which is between Elliott and Warner Roads, and it was on the east side of Price. So it was a half section of land there, which when I came to Arizona State College, the farm was just a couple blocks south of Broadway, and they actually owned 40 acres of land on each side of Mill Avenue. And then they had the other land leased down to Southern Avenue. So they had quite a bit of land under their control, but only owned 80 acres. And, but they had already acquired this half section, and then they started developing that. And so they could get out of downtown Tempe, so to speak. And we horticulturalists were the least objectionable, so they got out the pigs and the cows and things like that, furred the chickens, and then after everybody else had gotten their buildings and barns, why, then horticulture was to move, but by that time, gosh, we just don't have money left. Well, because of my great foresight, they had to build horticulture. I had designed what I wanted out there in the way of a little classroom and a little laboratory and the greenhouse and the lath house and his and hers 2 toilets. No one else had designed-in toilets on the farm. All the other buildings had no toilets. So they had to build horticulture because it would be essential to have toilets there. So because of that great foresight, I didn't realize I had that much foresight, but it came out that way.